consider those for approval. For direction to staff.
Madam Chairman.
Yes.
My question is, looking at agenda item number 7, which Russell brought up, it appears that meeting of the goal is going to be the #1 priority for project. So I think this board needs to really consider, we kept these goals broad purposely, but now I think that's going to bite us when we try to get to number 7. Because how are you going to, I mean, how, whose determination is going to, who's going to make the determination for that goal? I mean, that's a better fit for the, you see what I mean? I don't know that we maybe want to talk about number 7 and this together before we put these in stone. Because the problem is, with a real broad goal, and that's the #1 emphasis on awarding a project. Well, every project's going to meet those goals because they're so broad. So I'm just asking.
But are they refined enough at this point to do other ones?
Well, and what they've done in
They're
the
just gearing up.
backup material here is saying, here's the 5 recommended goals. And then under the objectives, it's spelling out more, honing it down, as you said, and actually tying each of those objectives to what goal is applicable to. So some of that work's already been done, other than our reviewing it and agreeing or disagreeing with, or adding or.
I would add that the emphasis on the project prioritization as well as in the forms, project solicitation forms, is on objectives rather than the goals, and that the goals are really a way for us to organize the objectives in the plan.
Following up on, I have the same question Paul had, but as a specific example, if we go to number 7 and you look at the #1, these are going to be scored on these criteria. And the very first one says, how is the project contribute to the urban plan objectives? And then you look back to the objectives and there's 19 of them. Now, remind me again, are those objectives prioritized, or are they just 19 random objectives, not one more important than the other?
Well, at this point, they are not prioritized. It is up to the management group whether or not to prioritize. It's included as an option in the EWR guidelines, and some regions choose to do that, to prioritize. And that's to help them go through the project selection process. Others decide to give them all equal weight.
It just seems like to me, it seems like, and we can get into this later in item number 7, but the answer is going to reflect on how we look at item number 3. And that question is the people who rate these projects, since it's going to be somewhat subjective, but yet it's going to have a numerical figure attached to it. So they're going to look at the objectives in order to score it based on the #1 criteria on our scoring list. And so if each one of these objectives is the same,
Same weight.
the same weight, so that if it meets 5 of the objectives, then theoretically the project would get a higher score than if it just meets 1. Is that?
That's right. So it's not based on prioritized objectives, but it is based on, how many objectives. For one that meets 3 or 4 objectives, it will score higher in that category than one that just meets 1.
Once the work groups interact too, I think at that point you really start to consolidate. But until they're all sitting together, this may jaw an awful lot of conversation. Like, wow, I didn't know we had an economic project here.
Well, we've had this concern in these conversations from the start, is that we don't want to, this board doesn't want to give the impression that we let people go down the road creating something, and then we, at the end of the road, say, we don't want, that's why I want to be right in front of how this board needs to prioritize how they should come forward, because obviously, the urban people have needs that are going to far outweigh a meadow or something, or even some ag land. In the greater scheme of things here today, me personally feel that way as a county supervisor, because that's where my priorities will be, supporting the
Kind of based on population served.
Yeah, it is kind of a cost benefit per capita.
Well, I'm thinking that.
I just throwing it out there, so the train doesn't get far down the road, then everybody's mad at us.
Yeah.
Well,
Well,
just bringing it up so we
I'm
talk
thinking
about
though, as Bill just pointed out though, that, if we buy off on the draft objectives, then one of the really easy way to rank, and that goes right to what you were saying, is how many of these objectives does that project satisfy?
But we-
And personally, I think I would rather use that than to try to rank these objectives and then say, okay, well, your project satisfies only objective one, but it's our top priority. But you down here that satisfy 4 that aren't the top priority, but would take care of 4, you don't count as much.
Well, that's where the rubber's gonna meet the road, because to my thinking, some of these objectives may be more important than the others, and
But see, that's the problem, how do we arrive at
a
that?
municipal project that's gonna benefit an entire community full of people may only meet one objective, and
That's where it gets skewed.
Right.
and that's
yeah.
really important, whereas a project that's gonna address 3 or 4 of these others that probably don't have the priority, say, of a municipal water system, you say, well, it gets 4 points because it meets 4 of the objectives. Frank's water system only gets 1 point because it only meets one of the objectives, but
But
that
it-
objective happens to be helping a whole community full of people.
But in
Yeah.
effect, you've just told all of those work groups precisely how that metering is gonna work. Obviously, if it's an urban benefit to the community of Quincy, it's gonna far outweigh, a duck pond down in Silver Lake.
But we
Yeah,
haven't
but
said
not,
that.
not the way it's
Well,
established.
We're the ones that make the call at the end, correct?
No, but that's, once we
I
made
think we
this,
should do it ahead of time.
But with due respect, I don't know who the folks, that's what the S is out there, but I guarantee you, when you said that statement about duck ponds,
yes.
I can fill this
No,
room
no,
with
I was
people out there.
being-
I know, those duck
I know
ponds
that.
are way, I don't care what you're drinking.
We're
They're
absolutely-
way more important than what you're drinking.
And they may get a grant more rapidly than would a water system for a community with people.
Actually.
So that's the argument.
Good point.
Well, and I think I disagree with my patriots here in that part of the function of this group is to make those final decisions.
Well, as long as.
And
that's
so
good.
what the ranking and criteria is for is to try to make it a little more fair. But if you come down to something where we're all sitting here and we're looking at your example, where there's something that maybe only satisfies one objective, but takes care of 2,500 residents, as opposed to one that might restore a habitat or something like that, that's where we come in to make that decision, I think. Otherwise, we don't need
Give
us.
it some kind of point weighting though too, Sherry, because if you have.
Well,
a
we
top
already
priority,
said we
you
were
have
gonna
to
do
do
that.
That's the
Sure.
problem, if it
We already
gets,
said we
if it gets 4 points for meeting 4 of these, and Frank's project only gets 1, and I don't mean to single you out, but it's a handy example.
Frank's
Yeah. Frank's like, I'm sorry I came.
I won't use that. But let's say that another project which meets a very high objective only gets 1 point, so then when the projects get to this board and this one has this numerical rating and this one has this numerical rating, it's gonna be difficult at that point to say, yeah, but we still think that's a better project. I would rather,
Well, I didn't mean weight the project, I mean weight the objective. If you have an objective that's much higher priority than all the rest, like other things I've done and that I'm aware of in the past, you get like maybe 3 points to that one and only 1 point to something that's just an average objective type of thing.
We also have a ton of objectives that don't measure up with the awarded grant history. So again, we got an audience. It may appeal to us dramatically, but nobody has ever been granted an award.
Yeah, it isn't, the grant funders.
Yeah, the grant funder could care less.
Yeah. Randy?
Item number 7 on the agenda, is that the right number? Yep. Has come up with a ranking system to look at.
right,
And it doesn't just deal with objectives, it deals with objectives, strategies, statewide priorities, shovel ready, matching funds, partners, climate change, drought preparedness, impact if non-funded, preliminary engineering, community benefits, disadvantaged community or tribal, number of projects submitted by proponent, and project cost leveling. So I just wanted to give you that it's not just the selection that's being proposed and that you're going to go over today is a lot
Is
more
not just ranked up by objective.
just, not just ranked by
Right,
objective.
and that's the point I was trying to
Okay.
make, that ultimately when it comes here, It's all of that that we're supposed to be looking at.
And
And,
you'll have a
and the other
chance to
thing,
tear
just
into
to be real frank about it, is I don't know how we would ever come to agreement.
Oh,
I'm
I
ranking
know,
things.
I just want to.
So why set us up for failure, you know?
Yeah, but one
Because
of the-
everybody here thinks something's more important
Right,
than
but one of the
something.
struggles I just heard coming from you guys is that if I'm sitting in Holly's shoes, and she's on the agriculture committee, which is total rural, well, why even meet? Because you basically just said, or we're basically just saying, well, if it's gonna benefit the population a whole lot more, then why should they put in all the effort to come up with all these different projects? And it's gonna come before us, and they've done all this work, and we're gonna say, you know, great job, Holly, but sorry, there's not enough.
Well, but that's not the only criteria, that's
Yeah,
what
that was just
Randy
an
was
example.
No, but I know, but I'm saying, it is important for us, I think, to come up with something soon, to tell people,
Yes.
this is how we're gonna do it.
Yeah.
Because they're gonna put in tremendous amounts of effort, all on their own. And they're gonna bring it to us, and we're gonna say, you know, these are all needed projects, but it isn't gonna meet what we're gonna do. And so they've done all this work for nothing.
Well,
I wouldn't be happy about that.
I would-
Paul already knows that.
I don't think any of us would, and I'm hoping that item 7's gonna address some of that when we get to it. Terry?
I'm sorry, I can't have something, make some comment. No, but I guess pull it out of the bigger picture. The other thing to remember about this process, and I have to remind myself of the work group, is we have this initial core thing, but we're looking at the long range plan, and any preparation we do now is also to set us up for funding for other things. So, you know, people shouldn't get discouraged. If this round and with the IRWM and this group, we do have some priorities that are related more to urban stuff, say, there's a ton of stuff coming down the road. We're seeing the guidelines coming out for these monies, grant monies right now. And
They're
so,
more categorical.
huh?
Yeah, they're more categorical.
Right,
So in
Right,
other
but
words,
I'm
if
saying
there's
that
money
so-
just used for municipalities, we
Right.
can't sit there and put
Right.
it off in the forest.
There's gonna be
So we're all
pools.
ready to go, hey, right, go with this.
Exactly. There's pools of money that are gonna be designated. He's not gonna be able to go for some pools of money, but they're gonna be more for ag stuff. So nobody, at some point, nobody's really wasting their effort. I mean, I agree having some guidelines so people understand how the project's getting picked, because it is a lot of effort to get prepared. That is a good thing for, I think, all our groups to know, is like, what, if I put this work in, how am I getting ranked and judged and things like that. But again, outside this process, there are all these other grant possibilities that'll come down the road too, and they're gonna have their own criteria for evaluating your project. But if all of us can help bring as many projects in our area to that ready to submit stage, then we're all that much further ahead too. So we shouldn't get discouraged.
And it's premature.
Mhm.
It's just simply premature. You guys are just fleshing out the opportunities.
Well, there's, again, when we get to item number 7, you're really having the right conversation. Item number 7 is just coming later in the meeting.
Right.
Because it's talking about prioritization, what was the other word you used in there?
Selection and prioritization.
Okay, so,
I make a motion to move forward as number 3,
okay,
accept the goals and objectives.
is there a second? All in favor? Anybody opposed? I'm not hearing very loud in favor, but anybody opposed? Maybe I'll count that way. Okay, we move on. Item
Tribes
4,
like these too, right?
We went over them.
Yes, and then
Wow.
their comments are incorporated.
We've been had to till midnight.
I know, for 3 or
Congratulations.
4 days.
This is not the easiest part of the whole process, to
Believe
decide
me.
to make an action.
Okay, item
But the
4,
next meeting will be drilled.
Can I, Sherry, can I just
Yes.
ask a question on so the draft goals and objectives, the language, and inclusion of the last 2 objectives by the ag group, those are all accepted? Do you want, so just wanted to point out that we also did an exercise at the work group level in the tribes as well, where we tried to attach the objectives to each of the goals. And I just wanted to point out that pretty much, you know, what's in here, the X indicates, you know, that there was a relationship there. This is kind of the aggregate of all of the work groups. I didn't separate it out. But I guess I just wanted to point out that pretty much all of the goals and objectives are related,
Right,
with very few exceptions, so.
I think we figured that one out
Okay.
real quick.
You know, the other issue. They're still pulling tracks. No, I mean, you got input. That's what I'm saying. Now, we premature.
Okay, administrative draft baseline technical study, that's a mouthful.
We'll just keep going.
So one of the tasks in the EWR work plan is the development of a baseline technical study. We have, probably better to call it a staff draft than an administrative draft, but the purpose of it is to summarize the existing water management related studies and efforts that have gone on in the region. And then it will provide the scientific and technical background for the plan update. So to get the process started, we issued a call for studies in November. And staff has been collecting, has also gone around collecting studies on their own, and then we've had submittals also from the various work groups. Part of the task was the development of a database. So the results are in that document, and I'll also show you where they are on the website. So the categories, the database categories to date include biotic studies and assessments, climate change, conjunctive management, demographic information, and disadvantaged communities, bird licensing and dam facilities, flooding, forests and wildland fires, groundwater, infrastructure, land planning and conservation, legislation, legal, miscellaneous policy documents, recreation, restoration, stream flow, water quality, water supply and conservation, watershed assessment, and watershed management and planning.
That's appropriate.
That was for me, and I was very impressed with this one I worked with. I mean, there's people, everybody's been working on pieces of this for so many years, and there is so much available, several resources. But to see it kind of all pulled together, must have been a big hit.
So as part of this process is identification of data gaps. So 3 areas that we could use more information is conjunctive water use and conjunctive water management resources, recreation planning resources, and water supply and management plans. This is going to be an ongoing process until we get the plan drafted. We're hoping that by putting this out there, that it will also trigger some thoughts from folks about submitting what other types of documents and data they can submit to kind of help fill in these gaps. So the next step is for the management group review and then to release it to the stakeholders for review and hopefully trigger some of that feedback. And then again, staff will continue collecting and incorporating the comments and documents that are received. So in your package, you have the both the database that is in the categories below, or that we went over, and then also the text of the technical study. And this will form the eventually form the chapter, the technical background chapter of the draft plan. So I also wanted to part of this effort was to put it on the website. And I wanted to show you where that was. So Zeke and Paul have worked with Jessica and our team to put this together. And if you scroll down, it's by alphabetical order, all of the documents. And then if you click on a document, it shows you generally where the document is related to, and then it gives you some information. There's some keywords that you can search by, and then there's a link that will take you to the document. So you can search by, I'll go back here, you can search by keywords here, or you can actually zoom in. If you know it's in Sierra Valley, you can zoom in over here and then click on the pen and it'll pop up.
Very nice.
So Zeke and Paul put a lot of work into this. And Paul, is there anything you'd like to add?
It's still ongoing. We're still working on it, so new features coming as we go along. With the allowing people to upload new documents as they get them, and not necessarily having to go through us. Adding users, letting people sign up as a user, and then being able to upload more documents, technical study. So.
Are you getting pretty good participation?
Well, so far it's just from the work group coordinators or anyone. I think we've got 135 documents in there right now.
Wow.
running in the
One
range
question
of.
I have, because one of them mentioned is in my supervisorial district, where we're talking about recreation planning resources, and it says no recreation plans for these districts were found. I know they have a recreation plan, so where did we look? Did we outreach to them directly, or did we just look online?
Well, we have, staff has looked online, so, we weren't able to find those, so I guess if you know of, a plan that's out there, then we could reach out to that entity to have it a copy.
And I'll see what I can take up with them.
Your Jim Bowen, I think there's a district.
He does, but he's not listed here. I think they have these plans.
Yeah, there's a district
So
here.
he's the ones that don't.
These are the ones they said they don't find out.
So you're on the naughty list if you're in
Oh, yeah.
No, you're
Yeah.
So that's
What is
part
the
of
name of the Quincy one? Is it Quincy?
Central Plumas
Cen-
Recreation.
yeah,
Central
Central
Plumas, because
Plumas
I've been noticing this.
I have a question. Do you guys really like doing this?
Now, you're not supposed to ask them.
In my day job,
Gee.
I couldn't get a room full of people to even do 1/10 of the quality of this work. I just want to know where this comes from, so I can show folks that real people do this for a living, and they do a damn good job at it.
I guess I'd have to say, don't talk too much, because she's gonna wanna charge us more money.
Oh! Yeah, no fluffing here?
Yeah.
Just talk to the dog.
it.
And it's just saying, we do.
This is also 25 years with the studies. It's not just yesterday, it's 15 years ago, 20 years ago.
Yeah, but putting them in a package,
Put it together.
putting them in a package is a
That's what
different
I
animal.
was saying, that's gotta be a job.
We got archives of
It's like
things
my
that ever
boss.
going nowhere.
So just to point out where this link is, it's under the documents on the website, it's the first link.
Good.
Obviously, there's a lot of information, and I'm gonna guess we just touched on it.
Mhm. Yep.
I've seen the library of Loomis Court, there's a lot of documents there. I'm sure they're not in PDF form.
You're right about that.
Well, that, Sierra Institute, I mean, well, like John said, it's 20 years I've been involved in it, and I know how many different organizations and studies and things have been done.
Right, and it's, Randy's right, it's gonna be elusive for a while to get all these things together. There was that basic 6 study done of recreational infrastructure needs in the county, just in this county, and it's real good, and mostly still accurate 10 years later, because nobody's got any money to do anything.
Well, it's kind of like Vision 2020,
Right.
basically, same
Right.
thing, where you identify the needs, but as you just said,
Yeah.
either there's no one that can accomplish it, or there's no money to do it. Either that or we're too old. Says the birthday person.
John, is there a bibliography of what?
Well, there is over there, but I mean, it definitely takes research to do it.
But I think this, as we're
More a
going through
list.
this, wouldn't it be kind of it wouldn't be that impossible as we find things to add them.
We could at least include the title and estimate and where to
Right,
find
they got a link.
Right.
What about QLG? There's gotta be tons on that. Studies, does Forest Service have that?
Well, that's what I was gonna ask.
Count on there being no archive, except what Delasol has.
He doesn't have a look on his face like he has any resources.
Most of the QLG stuff is on QLG.org.
Yeah, that's what, and I think that's the case with a lot of the different organizations.
We're just kind of doing a brainstorming here because they're finding more information.
Yeah, there's still the opportunity to add things.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
This
all
will be
right.
an ongoing thing, and really releasing it this early is twofold. One, to help bring in more projects. People can look at this and see, oh my, things like documents not in here, and provide that. And also, as the work groups start to dig in on the resource management strategies, it'll be really helpful for them to have these documents to go to as they develop the strategies.
And going into the future, I think it's huge to have as much as we can get at one spot. Because people people change and organizations change, and yet the data that they worked hard on and got together is still meaningful.
As voluminous as it is too, it's really gonna expedite the filtering and consolidation. You gotta get it up there before you can get out of there, otherwise people just ask me questions.
Would you?
There's the way in.
Yeah,
Well,
well,
we
and so
just-
many times you have the new faces that say, you know, we really need to look at that. You have the older faces that are sitting going, well, 4 years ago, we just spent a lot of money to look at that, and the baseline hasn't changed, you know, so I think having a knowledge base is huge.
One of the things I recently experienced in working on the 2105 letter was to go back into the file boxes of Brian Morris. And it scared me, because there was a lot of documents in there, but that's the only place they are, and they weren't really organized very well. Well, they were organized to a certain extent. And so the consolidation of information into one source, I mean, it's invaluable. It's a library in itself.
Well, and there's another point you bring up with the 2105, which I was gonna simply mention, that there is a raft of opinion that just went out as of like yesterday by noon. And a lot of that would be a teaser for all of these work groups on virtually every subject, if you really went in there and looked at the degree of comments and where they went.
If they let.
Because they weren't talking about a curtain only.
And if they go public.
Yeah,
If they
if they
go
go public, some of the organizations.
We're going public with ours, but, you
It's,
know,
yeah, I hope so, because I read.
It's already
the
public.
world. Too late to change the mind now. Okay, so what do you need from us on this? Just, discussion, what kind of direction do you need?
Is it okay at this point to go ahead and share that with the work groups?
Yes.
And to post it on the website?
Yep.
And it's a work in progress, right?
It is a work in progress and will be marked as administrative draft.
And it'll be on your document, right?
Yes, I wanted to point out that, on the website, they've added, a drop-down under documents called draft IRWM plan. And that's going to be where we post the, draft documents for public review. If there's a name that you guys would like to change that to, that's fine, but that's the intent, is to house the documents for stakeholder and public review there.
I think that's fine.
Okay.
Okay. Moving on, draft project solicitation package. Item 5.
So the project solicitation forms were reviewed by all of the work group participants and the tribal participants as well. No changes were received. And there was, as John noted, there were a couple of requests for conceptual forms. And that's kind of the initial step that we had talked about. I did include that form at the back of this agenda item. I shouldn't say the form, a form that could be used for that purpose. One idea was to do 2 lists of projects for inclusion in the plan. One would be the prioritized list of projects, and the other one would be a list of projects to track for the future, and that would be an appendix in the back of the plan. The intent would be to review both lists periodically after the plan update to get up to date. So one thought would be to use a conceptual form for that second list, the track list. Those would be for projects that may not be at a point in their development that they were ready to be ranked or prioritized. It could also be used for a phased approach where they people could put forth their ideas for projects and then it could go through an initial vetting where we could, they could decide, I'm not sure who they is, but it could be decided whether that project would qualify for inclusion in the prioritized list. That would make it a longer process than what is laid out for in here, but that is an option, and we could do it either way. I did, so staff did add some items to the list since they were reviewed, and that was based on, primarily on the 2015 draft solicitations that came out, that were just released about a week ago, I think. And that was to make sure that we include all of the highlighted items in that solicitation. See, I just wanted to go through those, and I guess I didn't have it in here. So I'll, just to go through those quickly, I added some clarification and instructions. I actually just pulled out the example of successful projects as well. The link to those projects that are on the website, EWR website, and that was just to make that more clear for folks of where that was, and that's on page 2 of the instructions. The project category, updated those summarized categories based on the goals for the UFR region, and that was on item 2, general project information of the form. The second one down is project categories. So it's just kind of a couple word summary, and that's for us to be able to categorize the projects. It's up to you guys if you want to, if you feel that that's an important thing to do. It's just a way to maybe lump the projects together. Another thing that was I added for clarification was there was a program priorities table on here that was really redundant with the RMS table in the form, and I combined the two just for clarity and to make it easier. And then I added the objectives that were the draft objectives, and now I've adopted the objectives. And then I added an item called drought preparedness to the project impacts and benefits table. And that is on page 6 of 10 at the top, item 4. And that was because there's a big emphasis on drought in the upcoming packages coming down from the state.
So, by the time we get the grant time.
At entity, and you look at this form and you go, oh my gosh, how am I gonna do this?
Go Randy.
Well, you know, I think I like John's suggestion really that at some point we have a short form.
Yeah, it's on the back right there.
That's it. And use that first, even though, like you say, it's a phased approach. But when you really look at filling this really long one out, it will be a lot of work for somebody to go through all that and then bring it and just, as Paul said, be told, no, this doesn't really satisfy any of the real criteria, or it doesn't rise high enough to file or whatever. So I think that some level of pre-ranking or pre-discussion is really important in that respect, because people just get discouraged and mad when they put all that time into something and then they're just, you know, basically said, bye, take it home.
Well, or it's a long shot and they want it bad enough to go for it.
Well, and in that
Well,
case.
what the hell, you vet it, that's what everything's going on in this world.
Well, and really the interesting thing is, it's not like that organization would be prevented from ever applying for a grant themselves from someone. So if nothing else, even if they don't rank really high in our process, that would not preclude them from trying for the same grant or a similar grant, and we will have helped them to some extent package their proposal.
Or
Yeah, well, and on the other hand, you know, when
That
this is
situation in our.
there and they know it's there,
We've got
we encourage them to conform to what's here.
Well, and that is
Be a
the other
little more
thing.
creative, you know,
Yeah,
creating
if
the
you're super
project.
serious, maybe you want to put that level of effort in.
Yeah,
but
you're gonna, you know,
my observation is most of our groups and organizations that would be doing this are understaffed, underfunded. They're frantically looking for grants to keep their heads above water, and to expect them to put in that level of work when it might be something that really doesn't have a chance, I think is unfair to them. And it's kind of like we said with the RACs.
Yep.
And things like that. Resource conservation districts and things, it's just, you know, that's a lot of work for somebody that's all volunteer and has no money.
So, one of the, stop.
Tom,
Yeah.
Is that looking at the long form and then the short form, and we have the short form in our file, but
Sure.
exposing the groups to the long form, going, if it's not this process, another process, you have to really drill down to a lot of very specifics and issues with the grant. And
Be prepared.
sort of shocking people a little
There
bit
you
by
go.
giving them the long form, but also giving them a slice of reality and then coming forth, oh, look, we have the short form. Maybe that's what we use to vetting, and you're gonna make a decision on that today. But people really need to understand that grants, you have to do a lot of work on.
Yeah.
They are not the easiest thing. I've been doing straw polls at the working group meetings. And I go, who here has written a grant? Afraid if I ask that question today, how many hands would go up? Generally, for most of the work groups, not many hands went up. And I will tell you about our capacity sitting there. The exception would probably be the Uplands and Forestry group. A lot of those folks have experienced that a lot. So we got all, I would say when the hands went up in that work group, it probably added up to and exceeded all the other hands that went up in the previous work groups. Now, that's not, a population size, you're looking at who's coming, 7 or 8, 10, 12 people. Just to point that out. So this is kind of a good tool overall, even if it doesn't fit into our process, because it does get people exposed to what they're going to see in an independent grant that may come their way. It may not match this all, but understanding that you have to put that effort in and drill down into it is important. So it's sort of a learning process for the region.
So as things are being developed in the work groups, why wouldn't they be provided with both?
They are.
That's what I'm thinking, because they need to see what they're gonna have to fill out if they're halfway successful through the first phase. And it forces them to start gathering their information and thinking through the project. And then the shorter form, actually, if they get far enough along, they want to present.
And we have provided that, but we wanted them to actually be exposed at first to going, whoa, look at all this, and then we've been providing the short form.
Well, it does weed out. Terry?
Well, and it shortcuts the end work,
Sure.
because if you do go for the grant, you've already got some
At least
foundation.
Got some foundation.
Terry?
One thought I had, because I'm thinking about projects that may already have that long form or ready to fill that long form out. There's projects out there that might have that. Maybe we could add a line in that pre-concept one that just says, do you have because that should have some merit too. I mean, if you're looking at projects and you have 4 or 5 that you, at the pre-concept level that you're saying yes to, but then 1 or 2 of them have already they're ready to go. I mean, you may want to look at those ahead of time, or at least know that person, that entity is that ready to go. So maybe just a question on that short form that just says, could you fill out the long form today? Or do you have it filled out, the long project solicitation? Because it seems like you wouldn't want to prioritize a project and be waiting, to see if someone can actually develop that long form when you do have somebody who's sitting in the wings already has that developed and could move forward with the project. Assuming that the pre-concept got passed, but maybe just knowing that, like if you just had a box that you check down there and saying, yeah, the long form. I mean, because there's a lot of things in that long form that take time to do if you haven't started that process or you don't follow through, and yet the committee is saying that this project's a go and you're waiting 6 months for these people to get that long form filled out. It might be just worth it, just a thought to know what project out there is really that much more prepared to go from the get-go on the pre-concept.
Anybody
It's
else
just
here
a
have
thought.
a thought on that?
Maybe on Facebook.
So it's kind of like a natural form.
Sounds like a good idea. Yeah, it sounds like.
You're gonna really need to have that for your own selection process, otherwise you're gonna get bogged down in pages of
Okay,
documents.
can we add that?
I have a question that, if I'm voting on this, I'm assuming somewhere out there of those little hands that stuck up in the air that write grants, that somebody else has looked at this objectively and said, yeah, this is okay, I could fill this out, that writes grants. Can I make that assumption that either your staff or that you've had experience, or that we've had people look at this and says, yeah, this is reasonable? Because it's hard, because it's hard for me to vote on something that if there was a person that said, this is the stupidest farm I've ever seen in my life.
Didn't get that.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure
They
you
all reviewed it already, correct? Work groups have all looked at it and made their
Yeah,
recommendations.
so it's reasonable
It's
in the
been vetted
sense of
already.
grant writing, this is a reasonable document.
Russell, there's probably 10 people in the floodplains metals group that has that capability. I'm not gonna almost name them right now. Brian, Dr. Swell. We've got quite a few members in our work
Yeah.
group that can write grants right now.
But it's not so much the grant, it's not the who can do it, it's that they've looked at this
Does it
and
make
said, this is a reasonable, or better yet, this is good for them, man. In fact, I've seen grants that are harder to answer the questions than this one. That's all I want to say, is it just that it's been out, somebody has looked at this and said, yeah, it's pretty good.
This is probably somewhat in sync with awarded grants that you've already looked at, isn't it?
Right, this is, so the format we took was based on a number of other urban regions awards.
Thank you.
There you go.
Thank you.
She said that at the start.
Yeah, I wasn't listening. Now that she said it, she has to repeat things to me face to face. Thank you.
I would add that there are some of the handouts are examples of awarded or awarded grant applications. So they're back here on this table here. There's also a list of the awarded grants from the drought solicitation that was held in 2014. And then I also included a couple examples of a very similar form that was filled out, and those projects were included in the Irwin plan at the end. So just for examples to follow.
And I would say, please, if you don't have copies of that, because they are on the table, pick them up. Because I specifically asked Uma to bring 2 examples of successfully funded grants, so that as a group, we
That's all I
will be
need
able
to
to
hear.
start educating ourselves on what was funded.
Is that a motion, Russell?
So,
Yes, it is.
So just to describe these, I only printed out the first 13 or 14 pages because some of these applications are about 700 pages long.
Yeah.
So I included a link, a direct link, although it's not live. So I'll try to fix that. But yeah, so it takes the link to the whole where you can get all those documents.
And that's gonna help filter every work in their project analysis.
The grant that got us here, we spent a serious month with a consulting firm, Leah and I, developing all the budgets, all the details that fit into the DWR template. Seriously, it was a very serious month of work to get this grant up here. And so all this is intended to assist everybody.
Yeah, and I've done a number of grants myself, and honestly, I think this is pretty simple compared to some that I've seen. Very self-explanatory, and it's kind of, like check the box instead of have to write 5 pages.
And that's a good point, Sherry, that, this is not a grant application itself, so you don't have to attach all these massive documents to it. It's really just to find the projects that would, once that information is all collected, that it would be, eligible to those projects or grants.
Big
Okay,
step
so
towards the
I think
application.
Russell made the
I do.
motion
I have a
to,
motion.
Russell made the motion.
and we got a second.
Sherry, I think Holly had a question.
I just had a quick comment that came up in our work group session about capacity for actual implementation, and implementation might actually include the grant writing process. So our ag work group might come forward with some very good project ideas. All of us have full-time businesses, so we're not going to be writing that grant. Where is the capacity going to come from to help us get to that level? I mean, we have our UC Cooperative Extension, but they're already overtaxed themselves. So that was just kind of an FYI, the point of discussion in our group that came up. So something to think about as you're ranking project ideas.
Yeah, actually, I think that's a good point, Holly. We kind of skipped over it. It's objective number 9 in your package, or 19. Work with counties, community groups to make sure staff capacity exists for actual administration and implementation of grant funding. And I know that's kind of been a buzzword in the background for the last few weeks about how do we do this, but at least we're trying to get it identified.
Well,
Find a way to
and
do it.
the other thing would be, there's nothing worse than having somebody receive money who does not have the capacity and have them fail to produce the results and have to come up with the money to pay it back that they haven't got anymore because they spent it. So, and I've seen that more than once in the last 8 years. So, we don't want that. But now we have a motion in a second to approve the release of the project solicitation. All in favor? Opposed? Oh, you guys woke up.
And Sherry, is that for, releasing both the conceptual form and the?
Yes.
Yeah, with the addition of the box to show whether or not.
Yeah.
And release both at the same time?
Right.
Right.
As far as how that would play out is, timing, if we release both the first week in April, it was a tentative deadline of June 1st. That's what staff was suggesting to keep on track. With the conceptual form, do we want to have a separate deadline for that and then a vetting process and then, those that make it through the vetting process would be asked to submit the long form? And should that deadline would then probably be pushed out to July 1st?
I was gonna say, you're getting all tight there.
I was gonna say, even if we have, I don't have a problem with having an additional meeting of this group, but, I just think that that's too short of a timeline for people to get themselves together.
Will you amend your motion?
Well, is the motion gonna refer to as a draft, and then therefore for review by the work groups?
No, this is it. No, this is done. This is what's going
The
out.
work groups have already reviewed this.
These are going out, but she's just saying that the full package goes out with a return date of later.
Oh, no, the
than
return,
conceptual
well, we're
date.
discussing the return date.
Return date.
Gotcha. And then the motion, did the motion have a return date in it?
No, we just
No, it's
approved the
going to
paper.
No, she was throwing
But
up
he's
June, we
wants-
moved it out.
My brain here.
Randy, what?
Okay, so it sounds like you would like to vet projects through the short form first.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, I think with the aggressive timeline that she's talking about, that gives them an opportunity to get that short form back in that time frame.
So the short,
Short form can come back.
June 1st?
Yeah.
Before the next management group meeting, or, and who would do the vetting? How would you like that?
I personally think that it's probably us. I mean, we kept saying we want to be the decision maker, so I think that's what responsibility falls on you, if you think you're the decision maker.
I think they're gonna like that.
Okay, so then it would come back, the deadline would have to occur so that we could have it organized to come back for the next week. And then, we can go ahead and release the long form as well with, just let them know that the date will be July 1st on that one.
And with sufficient of time for us to review it in advance, to, but that's gonna be a challenge.
Okay, so we're going to release both 1 April, right? Okay, we're going to say short forms back by 1 June. And the people that survive that will then have to have their long form back by 1 July. Is that doable?
And, yes,
Okay.
and if they know they want to go through the long form,
Yeah,
do they
they
need
can-
to do the first one?
They can jump in.
No, they can submit whatever kind of form they want on that first
Just don't
program.
be disappointed.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Because basically, we're making it, if you want to work that hard, fine. If you don't, give us a
You're
short.
betting on your project.
Right.
Once you get the checkbox.
So if I understand what you just said, and I think it's really implementing what Terry suggested, I think you're creating a problem there. Because you're saying on one hand, we want a brief concept form, but we'll accept the big one.
Well, the big one doesn't
De facto-
matter.
So de facto, you're saying, I think you ought to submit the big one, just to get going. I mean, yeah, well, it may not sound that way, but that's gonna be the interpretation.
Well, I think what basically, if I'm not mistaken, the long form idea was you're so confident you wish to present it as a long form because you're just working ahead.
Or maybe you already have all that.
And you already have it done. And it doesn't change anything for us. We have the same information.
Well, I don't have a problem just saying, no, on the 1st of June, the only thing we'll accept is the short form.
Right. Yeah.
And then we
Yeah,
evaluate those
yeah.
and people move on from there.
That's not a problem.
Because it's not hard for somebody that's done the long form to
Yeah,
fill out the
to fill
short
out.
form.
True.
So let's do that. Let's say,
Short form back June 1,
yeah,
long form.
put it out on the 1st of April, everybody does short form back on the 1st of June. And then if they survive that, the long form back 1 July.
So,
At the
end of July?
Okay.
So how are we gonna have those vetted before the long form?
We're gonna have to have a meeting,
You're gonna have to-
and we're gonna have to make that the whole subject of the meeting,
Yeah.
not load
It's
it
gonna
up
have to
with
be
a
a
bunch
review
of
meeting.
stuff.
Let's take it down the road as to what it's gonna look like. Let's say you have the meeting, at which the short forms would be, distributed then to all the committee.
No, we should have those electronically, so we've read them before
Great.
the meeting.
Great, but at some point, say the 5th of June, everybody's got them in their hands. That then you make a decision and everybody who's a successful short former knows about it by the 10th or something like that of June, which is wildly optimistic. I think you ought to give them a month.
Well, she's talking the end of July.
She just said
Yeah,
end of
great.
July.
I think that's a lot better.
Okay.
Joe, you have a comment?
That was it. I thought we were talking June 1 to July 1, and that doesn't seem like it.
That's too short.
So the deadline for the long form would be the July one or the end of July?
The
End of July.
End of July.
Or just make it simple, August 1, June.
Yeah, right.
And the short form's required, is that correct?
Yes.
So,
Yeah. So everybody's, we're looking at the same
Apples
thing
and
from
apples.
everybody. Yeah. Okay, everybody in agreement with that? I think we can do consensus on that. Okay, we have a consensus.
I just have
Does that-
one
does
more
that-
question about the process. So if the short forms are submitted by June 1st, then we will review them in our July meeting, or
That would be a special meeting in
it will be a
June?
special meeting?
Special meeting just for those, for them.
Yeah, where that's all we do, rather than a whole.
Right. And can that be like the beginning of July, or that's not enough time to
No,
try?
yeah.
By mid-June.
As soon as we get them together, get a little time frame to review.
So
So maybe 2 weeks after the first or in June?
Sometime right the middle of June would be my preference,
Sooner
so
the
we can
later.
give people the most
As
amount
much
of
time as
time
possible, yeah.
to get the longer forms together.
Maybe we'll be higher.
Well, how dare you go to Ireland? Can we send them to
Yeah,
you
you get somebody-
electronically?
Yes, we can. I mean,
Yeah, before you go.
I don't have a quorum.
my graduation is
Okay, you guys are having a sidebar meeting there, what do
We're
you
just
talking?
we were just talking about the process and, where we're sitting vis-a-vis our schedule and getting to the end. This is a big step, getting these projects and kind of asking Uma where they are with the chapter development and everything. So just kind of, we're gonna make sure we're syncing with all
Is it gonna
that.
work?
Is this comfortable?
Yeah, that's what we're asking, are the dates gonna work?
This will push everything, the process that I have identified in here will be out a couple of months, but we'll just keep working on the plan chapters and, just everything should come together.
Okay.
And we are pushing to make it a little shorter so that, that solicitation, the Prop 1 stuff.
So we fit into it, yeah. Funding opportunities.
Yeah,
That was our focus.
Yeah.
Well, it sounds like the work groups are just really coming up to speed, as much as they're gonna come up to speed.
right.
No, actually, they'll be doing, really,
They've done.
they've done tremendous work on it, really
Yeah.
proud of them and amazed.
3.5, 4 hour meetings.
Yeah, now it's gonna get down to the,
Now it's meat.
okay, so we got the approach. Uma has, as I said, examples of successful projects that we should be educating ourselves on. That's the type of thing we need to look for.
That's
We got
on your
the,
schedule.
so, yeah, we got the dates as this solicitation is working through the system.
Yeah.
Mike, you have a look on your face like you.
Yeah, there was one thought I had earlier. As part of the resource advisory committee process, when there were, whether it was a concept phase or even the final phase, we permitted the advocates to be there in case there were questions, so if you can contemplate if that's something we want to do as well, or not.
What do you think? I lean to having them be there if they choose
I'm
to.
just
be there.
sure that you're.
And all of the work groups would be there represented anyway,
Or if-
by whoever is,
Sure.
yeah.
Somebody would.
Just need to make it a
Sure.
public meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
This room may not accommodate that, so we'll look at that too.
Yeah, well, you might look at the mineral building or something like that.
Is that a date that you want to set today for that meeting? Or-
That's the one in the village, yeah.
It would be mentioned. I did include a calendar, for the next item, that people could look at.
Anybody want to take a break?
Yeah, I got it.
Yeah, let's take a Let's take a 10-minute break.
Item number 7 follows the calendar, so.
Yeah.
There you go.
And that's liable to take a week or two.
How long are you gonna be
10-minute
there?
break, everybody. Hop up, run around, drink coffee, do something.